The next item is item 1B, notice of motion, petitions on the master plan, Clr Caterson Reserve. I understand we have a speaker who's in favour of the motion, Mr. Brendan Miller of Glenhaven, who wishes to address council regarding this matter. If you're here, can you please come to the front? Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brendan Miller, and I'm very proud to say that I've been a resident of the glorious Hills Shire all my life. I'm humbled to represent a community voice here this evening that wraps around outside, by the way. I'd like to thank the Mayor, General Manager and the councillors for the opportunity to speak this evening. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, ladies and gentlemen. If you could change a decision you made 3 years ago, would you? A lot's happened in 3 years. COVID has changed the way we relate to each other, to work and to our natural environment. Our country has been ravaged by fire, flood and heat waves, bringing our management of the natural environment into sharper focus and making our precious green spaces priceless in value. Our beloved Hills Shire has exploded in growth. Councils have changed, councillors have changed, and future plans for thousands of homes and residents have been announced. A lot has changed in 3 years. The current Clr Kasby Master Plan is a significant investment, both in monetary terms as well as an investment in our community. Making the best decision for our entire community today and for the future is paramount. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. If Council knew 3 years ago what it knows now, perhaps a different decision would have been made. A different master plan submitted, perhaps. I recognise that many of the councillors here tonight did not make that decision. However, they're here now and directly responsible for its outcome. The petition being tabled tonight shows a significant number of residents are deeply concerned about this development. Many were unaware of the development until recently, as the public consultation has been minimal. Including the original opportunity for feedback right in the middle of COVID. A sceptic may say the timing was convenient for a controversial development to go under the radar. An optimist may say the council missed a golden opportunity to more effectively engage with the community on such an important development. Council must hold a public briefing on the Clr Kasby Master Plan. It will reduce the anger and frustration of the community are feeling due to the lack of consultation and the allocation of this precious green space to an elite sporting group. It will not stop the master plan, nor should it. A long-term management plan for Clr Kasby and the surrounding area is something that must be developed and implemented properly. However, it will improve the outcome for the community by council including a wider range of feedback from residents. You may hear tonight disagreements on specific details in the master plan, such as the total number of trees to be cut down, or the exact square metre number is not accurate, or version 1 or version 2. To be honest, this completely misses the point and it's a distraction tactic. The fact is, this development will have a significant impact on many aspects of our local environment, on roads and traffic, and on the residents of the Hills Shire. Full stop. You may hear an argument against the petition numbers. 16,000 signatures, that's 8% of the Hills Shire residents that are concerned about this issue. Even if you halve those numbers to 8,000 residents in the Hills Shire are concerned enough to put their name to a petition to ask to be heard. And this is considering limited engagement to date. What is clearly evident from the comments on the petition is that residents were not aware of the development and they want to have their say. You may hear tonight that people who oppose this are anti-sport, that we need more sporting fields. I am not anti-sport. I am for community sport. I've played and coached sport in and for Castle Hill all my life, and I understand the value that it brings to the community. I currently coach both soccer and baseball for Castle Hill, two of the sports available to all of the Hills residents, and we're proud to call Clr Kasby our home ground. The proposed development does little for community sport or offsetting a field shortfall by effectively privatising our community green space. As a concerned resident of the Hills Shire, I asked the council to hold a public briefing on the master plan to hear directly from the community and create transparency in this process. In a development of this scale, such a small step is easy for council to grant and would mean a considerable amount to the community. If the council chooses not to hold a public briefing, I believe it will demonstrate a desire to blindly move ahead without meaningful engagement with the community they're elected to serve. This council has been in the news over the last few years for the wrong reasons. Wouldn't it be great to be in the news for the right reasons? My hope is that when council chooses to hold a public briefing, they will open themselves up to new, exciting ideas, to genuine feedback from the community and residents who regularly use this beautiful green space. And together, we may be able to create something every resident in the Hills Shire holds up as an example of how council and community can work together to create the most amazing green space in Greater Sydney. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. Councillors, you can alter or change a decision. Will you? Thank you very much.
Stay there. We'll call the meeting to order. Are there any questions for the Speaker? No questions? You can just sit down. Councillor Cox, you literally just got in there. Was it you?
I wanted one. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Kasby.
I've got one too.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thank you very much, Mr Miller, for that fantastic speech. I just had one question. You would have read the motion. Point number 9 talks about hosting a public briefing, and you yourself mentioned it in your speech. Can you explain to councillors and to council, what your idea of a good public briefing would entail?
Thank you, Councillor Kasby. I think a public briefing is where we can all get transparency on what's occurring with this process. And forgive me to go into my phone, but I think a reasonable interpretation of this will be for council to provide the community on all of the information it has online, via web pages, via PowerPoint presentation at a meeting together, so that the community can understand the intended pathway forward and its intended timelines. I think this would be really useful information, and also at that public briefing allow concerned residents and community to have input into the master plan.
Thank you.
I have a question for the General Manager, actually. Has Council placed information about the project on its website, and will more information be available in due course at the right time?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, it has, and it will.
Councillor Kasby, you had some more questions? Did any other councillors have any questions? Councillor Hodges.
Has Council allocated the field at Fred Caterson to, I quote, an elite sporting group?
Yes.
The council has entered into a non-binding MOU with East Rugby, and that all is on the website as well. At this point, the fields aren't constructed, so they're not allocated.
So the council has not allocated it as yet?
At this point, no.
Okay. That would be something that may occur or may not occur, is that correct?
It's possible, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr Miller? Councillor Cox.
The sports you coach, they've played in the hills.
Yes.
And when you're playing them, can I come and have a picnic on the field? In the middle of your baseball game or that sort of thing, can I come and have a picnic in the middle of the pitch?
I wouldn't recommend that, but when the game...
No, I'll be told...
Councillor Cox will be heard in silence.
Well, in the same way, if these fields go to Eastwood Rugby, the same thing would apply. When they're in use for the sport that, like your baseball, people can't use them, and when they're not in use, it's open to the community and anyone can use them. So I fail to see how this is privatising a public field.
Can I reply?
You can,
That's
but firstly, I'm very serious about this. All councillors and the Speaker are to be heard in silence. Thank you.
I think there's a distinction between an elite sporting group, like a professional organisation, Eastwood Rugby, that plays broadcast and televised games, versus community sport, where you have people rocking up doing barbecues and it's a family-orientated affair. There is a distinction. I'm happy to send you some more information so you can understand it.
I understand the distinction you're trying to make. I don't think it's applicable, but anyway.
Other Councillor Blue.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just through you to the General Manager. If this field was allocated to Eastwood and districts, and I'll emphasise and districts, if it was allocated to them and they weren't using it at a particular time, will this facility be open to the community?
Mr Mayor, that's entirely for another day and another decision, and a licence...
The General Manager will also be heard in silence.
The matter of the licence and the terms of the licence are clearly, it's premature to foreshadow that, and premature to I can't give you advice as to what form that takes.
Are there any other questions for Mr Miller? Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much.
We have a speaker against the motion, Robert Cusack, the Chairman of the Eastwood Rugby Club, who wishes to address Council regarding this matter. If you hear Mr Cusack, can you come forward?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As the Mayor said, my name's Robert Cusack. I'm the Chairman of Eastwood District Rugby Union Football Club. This is a very exciting project for our club. Let me take a few minutes to give you some background about our club and the reasons behind our relocation. Firstly, let me start by saying what we are not. We're actually not Eastwood Rugby, we're actually Eastwood District Rugby Union Club. In the same way that the Eels are actually Parramatta District Rugby League Club, district clubs like the Eels, like us, like Northern Districts Cricket Club, etc., have wider responsibilities. Our district actually stretches from Ryde to Wiseman Ferry, and Castle Hill is close enough to the centre of that. What we are a premier club with 10 teams, 7 men's and 3 women's. Our first grade side plays in the Shute Shield and is part of a pathway for top level players to a professional career. We currently have 3 Australian representatives, including 1 Wallaby. Sadly, the Wallabies weren't as successful as they'd like to have been in the World Cup in France. We're also the umbrella organisation for 6 junior clubs, and we recently received approval to start a new club at Box Hill, which we hope to have up and running next year. So what is rugby like in Sydney? Rugby's always been a vertical sport. That is, it doesn't have a wide base, but it does have high level exposure at higher levels. Participation is up 2% in the last 2 years post-COVID. The game is particularly strong in many schools, and here in the hills, that is definitely the case. Just about every school has a rugby program. And I might make the point that this facility will be open to juniors and schools to play on. I've heard the reference with the previous speaker talking about it being a premier facility. It'll be part of that, but it's also available to the community, and schools and juniors are very much part of that community. As well as running the rugby program, we operate 2 academies in the region, including critically one core Western Sydney Rugby Academy. We employ a full-time staff member to do development work in the schools and the junior clubs, and these are tangible, real commitments we make to the community. Finally, on the football field, we are one of the most successful clubs in Sydney Rugby, and the Sydney competition is recognised as the pinnacle of the club game in Australia. We have been premier 6 times in the past 25 years, with multiple grand final appearances in the period. But relocation. So why are we moving? About 25 years ago, the club noticed a distinct trend. Our players, members and supporters were increasingly coming from the north of Pennant Hills Road. That trend has become stronger and stronger each year. Importantly, 3 of those international players I mentioned earlier are all from northwest Sydney. Obviously, the new railway is a massive game changer, and the new influx of residents that it will bring is something that all the community organisations are factoring into their long-term planning. At the same time, the demographics around Marsfield, where we had been based, were also changing significantly. Putting all these factors together led us to have a deep think about our future, and that resulted in a decision to sell our ground at Marsfield, which happened in 2017, and look to relocate to Castle Hill. As all sporting clubs seek to do, we are working collaboratively with Council and obviously working within the regulatory framework. Now, a massive project like this is not without complications, but we are pleased with the progress to date, and we are looking forward to being based in such a strong and rugby-orientated community. Thank you for your time.
Are there any questions for Mr Cusack? Councillor Kasby.
Thank you, Mr Cusack, for coming in. I just wondered if you could explain to the public just how much access will be available, because I did speak to one of your members and they said with all the club competitions, with all the cups, with the training timetables, pretty much the only time available to the community would be maybe sometime in January. So I'd just like a little bit more clarity about public access. And will the public be able to walk onto your synthetic fields with their dogs and, you know, play with their kids on this facility as well?
I think the situation is that obviously, as it was mentioned in an earlier thing, if there's games or competition or training occurring, that's obviously going to be difficult. But wherever it's possible to have appropriate community access, Eastwood District Rugby Union Club's not against that. But it's obviously got to fit in with, you know, the aim is to make sure that the community has a place to have organised recreational sport as well. That's part of the balance in the community.
I've got a follow-up question, either for the General Manager or for Mr Cusack. Is it not going to be a decision of Council who will have access to that facility, and Council will have a say whether there's a synthetic field or not, and that's not proposed at the current time? Is that the case?
Mr Mayor, in answer to your question, the master plan leaves it possible for both outcomes. At stage one, it is not proposed to be a synthetic field, but it certainly could be, and it would have to go through its own process if it were. The licence agreement, there's no draft licence agreement. Council hasn't signed a licence agreement. All these are matters of things that would be taken into account when and if we get to that stage.
Councillor Kasby.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Cusack, could you just explain to the public exactly what facilities you're planning, or, you know, what you would desire, what you're likely to put into the DA? Because we did have a look at previous Facebook posts and things like that where you laid out exactly what type of facilities were there. So could you just, because I don't think the public are fully aware of just how much embellishment is going to happen on this site to reach the degree of elite rugby facility with, you know, media, broadcast lighting, all of those kind of things.
Sure. The intention is to have 3 sporting fields, appropriate change rooms that are available, and viewing facilities, tiered seating, a small area of covered seating, whether that's a grandstand or something else, that's yet to be finalised. But most of that detail is contained in the master plan that was put forward by Council.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Cox.
Yes, I actually I had siblings that lived right near TG Milner actually a while ago, and I did ask, did you ever, you know, notice the rugby running that often and that sort of thing? And they said they didn't see the field used that often. Like, it was a couple of times a week in winter, and you barely saw it on the lights on or anything in summer. Okay, for the benefit of everyone out there, I had siblings that lived near TJ Milner, the old field, and they told me that back when they lived near there, it was about a decade ago, but they didn't see the fields in use that often. It was a couple of times a week they'd see the lights on, and very rarely in summer. And, you know, that seems in contrast with what's been suggested would happen by Councillor Kasby and others.
Look, I can't speak specifically about 10 years ago, but I can tell you in the past the fields have been heavily used. I know in summer it's used for things like touch football, big competitions that ran there sometimes 4 times a week, so it may have changed over various times, but wherever possible, the aim is to make sure that this is a facility that is widely and well used by the community.
Are there any other questions for Mr Cusack? Councillor Jetty.
Thank you, Mr. Cusack, for your presentation. Really appreciate you coming in. Mr. Cusack, may I ask, amongst your members and patrons, is there quite a substantial number of people that you would say are residents of the Hills?
I'd say a significant number are residents of the Hills. Yeah, so we did, we're obviously when we were doing our planning, and I mentioned that we've been doing this over probably the last 20 years, we've noticed the demographic shift for both members and players. So this is where they predominantly live now, in the Hills area.
So, thank you. Mr. Mayor, follow-up question. So would I be right in having an understanding that the parents and grandparents who would otherwise be travelling fair distance outside the Hill Shire for practicing for their kids and grandkids for the rugby sport, or even to view such sport, elite sport and games which actually encourage kids to move into this area, they would be saving a lot of time and are welcome at your games in the grandstand and to meet players and learn from them, and there might be some things in place for coaching and encouragement and some programs in place?
Absolutely. All of that would be encouraged, and in fact it's in our interest to make sure that there's as much broader community participation in our sport and related sports as possible. It's a benefit to the community, and it's also a benefit to rugby overall in Australia.
Yep, so the fact that you will have facilities over there, they will be very well maintained, especially the toilets, which I'm very concerned about, and the change rooms where they will be clean and regularly looked after. Excuse me,
Councillor
thank
Jetty
you.
will be heard in silence.
Yes,
Thank you.
Of course they will. Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And coming from a school, a selective sport high school, Australia's first, I really appreciate and understand the importance of well-maintained fields and the coaching practice that goes hand in hand. Thank you very much, Mr. Cusack.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr Cusack, councillors? Councillor Kasby.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, the fields will be used just 24/7 for rugby only. There'll be no other use. We can't walk across them or play another sport or anything like that. It's purely fenced off for rugby.
The General Manager's... Sorry, Mr General Manager, you've answered that question previously. It's to be determined.
Well, it's to be determined, but I would imagine it's like all of our other sporting fields. When it's not in use, there's other access to the fields, and that would be the intention, and I think that's happened in other facilities that are allocated to other clubs throughout the Shire.
Okay. And one last one, if I may. Do you feel any sympathy to the community who are going to lose precious natural green space with threatened species? There's huge biodiversity there, really valuable wildlife habitat there, and we're potentially, if your end result comes to light, plonking a big grandstand, broadcast lighting, synthetic fields, a huge crowd, traffic, parking, merchandising, corporate boxes, all of these kind of things. Do you not feel that that's inappropriate to be putting in this precious place, which I know you live close by?
That speculation, I would say, and just now Mr. General Manager has clearly mentioned that this has not been put in concrete. I would like to call a point of order on that question.
I'll let Mr Cusack answer the question. No. Mr Cusack will answer the question in silence from the gallery.
What I would say is that we've got to find the right balance in our community, and there are people who don't have adequate places to play organised sport, etc. as well. So that's an issue that clearly needs to be considered as well, and I think all of those things were considered in the master plan. I read the document, and finding the right balance is a very important part of what that document was about.
I have a follow-up question for either Mr Cusack or the General Manager. Like any other proponent in council with any DA or any other proposal, would the proponent not need to comply with all relevant environmental legislation, whether it's acoustics or lighting or traffic, etc., or the proposal wouldn't proceed? The proposal would only proceed if it complied with legislation and guidelines.
Correct, Mr Mayor. The approval pathway will deal with those matters as and when the application is launched.
Are there any other questions for Mr Cusack? Thank you for coming in. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Councillor Kasby, do you have a motion?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the motion as it is written in the business paper.
Do we have a seconder for the motion?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that.
Second by Councillor Tracy. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Kasby?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. The reason for this motion is to give the community a voice. Many of us, including myself, weren't councillors last term, and adopting the Fred Caterson Reserve Master Plan was not our decision. Just 2 weeks ago, Council supported an engagement strategy, and if that was in place back in 2020, we may not have ended up with the huge community opposition we see here tonight. Councillors have received countless emails and phone calls from residents voicing their concerns, pleading us to reconsider this master plan, and with no public forum and no avenue available to them to publicly discuss such a significant development in a place they care deeply about, they have resorted to creating a petition just to be heard. They've come here tonight to tell us they're not happy, and the least we can do is listen. Yes, the sporting club users of Fred Caterson Reserve were directly consulted on the master plan, but the many other users and the local community were not. Yes, residents could view plans on our website or at the library, or be lucky enough to see an ad in the Herald. But remember, this was 2020. We were living through a global pandemic, and some contact-free correspondence would have been a logical and a respectful way to engage. A few months ago, over 800 letters went out just for the renaming of a reserve, and we received a whopping 277 submissions. For such a significant development at Fred Caterson Reserve, it is almost inconceivable that not a single letter was sent to residents. Not a single Have Your Say Facebook reminder was posted, when every other master plan that year had 4 or 5 of these reminders. I have to ask, why not? Why did Council overlook the sector of the community who enjoy this reserve for passive recreation? Walking their dog, bird watching, bushwalking, playing with their kids. There were submissions, a whole 36 of them, but doesn't this ring alarm bells that engagement might have been inadequate? I've spoken to locals on their doorsteps. People are angry and upset. Many are moving out. They feel that this master plan was adopted without talking to them. Another reason for this motion is to say that many regard this plan to be socially unjust. It forces our community to give up their access to public open green space. I acknowledge sport fields are important, and by some population-based calculation, we are 21 fields short. But let's be real. We're not talking about community fields here. We're talking about a facility totally at odds with its surroundings and with other venues in the reserve. Public open green space enjoyed by many now, but with the potential to be used by many more, has been allocated for the use and benefit of a few. Who decided that an elite rugby union precinct was the best use of this space in such a densely populated urban centre? Where is the evidence? I'm willing to bet that 20,000 people moving into the showground precinct will not be elite rugby players. They will want public open green space. They will move here because of it. Sport is crucial for our health and well-being, but an elite sporting complex with all the bells and whistles simply doesn't belong here. This is irreplaceable, critically endangered wildlife habitat that could be cherished by many for generations. Elite facilities typically include a grandstand, corporate boxes, amenity blocks, conference rooms, broadcast lighting, media facilities, synthetic fields, 24/7 access for members, car parks. Many residents say that this is quite frankly an insult to the local environment and the community. Traffic, crowds, noise, lighting and parking have far-reaching impacts. They don't stop at the field boundary line. The final reason is to ask for more transparency. No matter what Council's opinion is, our residents still feel they're being kept in the dark. In March, they were promised more transparency of process and better communication, but here we are in October, still with no information on expected timeframes or access to publicly funded environmental reports. Our community deserves respect. We didn't make this decision to approve this master plan. As you can see, there is overwhelming antipathy. This is why I am calling for an open and transparent public briefing.
We'll come to order. Thank you very much. Is there any other councillors that wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Tracy, you may ask questions.
Two questions. Is the first one through to the General Manager is, why wasn't Eastwood District Rugby Union Football Club listed as one of the sporting clubs that Council consulted with about the master plan when all the other sporting clubs were listed in the initial community consultation?
I'm not aware of that, Mr Mayor. I'd have to take that on notice.
Okay. And just a second, thank you, Mr Mayor. Why aren't the ecological and arborist reports available to councillors or the public yet?
Mr Mayor, like all projects that we've got under investigation and under development, there is a number of working documents that inform that. We've released the documents that we have on the website as much as we can. I think the staff are entitled to complete their work. Once work's completed, those documents will be made available to the public. They'll be open access documents like every other one. It's following a similar pathway as others. It's fair to say that when you've got environmental reports, you then go and solve other aspects of the design. You may need to come back to those environmental reports and actually test the assumptions based on how that design shakes down throughout that process. I think that's entirely appropriate, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Did you have any further questions?
No, Mr Mayor.
Are there any councillors that wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Kasby.
Thank you. This is through you, Mr Mayor, to the General Manager. Will this go out to exhibition once again once the reports are in and the final design is prepared? So can we have a guarantee on this, or will we choose a pathway where council avoids community consultation?
Mr Mayor, we'll follow the appropriate processes having regard to
The General Manager will be heard in silence.
having regard to the approval process that it needs to go through.
This is our council, you know. We live here.
I'll give you an opportunity. Under 15.19 of the Code of Meeting Practice, I have certain powers. I don't want to use them. Please, let's keep order at the meeting. Thank you very much. Are there any other councillors that wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Cox.
I have a question through you to the General Manager. I'm unaware of any DA process that would allow for what Councillor Kasby alluded to, some sort of approval process without the opportunity for community consultation.
Mr Mayor, it will depend on the approval pathway that is required, which is highly dependent on the scale, and we'll follow the appropriate steps.
Did anyone wish to address the motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'm happy.
Councillor Tracy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I rise in support of Councillor Dr Kasby's motion this evening, and I'm in support of it. And it's not because of the work the council officers have been doing in terms of their response to a council decision. And it's not due to the decision that council's made either. So there is no gripe against the council officers or the council itself. But I support this notice of motion, because over time it has become an issue for our community. And it's something we have to deal with tonight and ongoingly. It's something we can't just dither away into a process where we have substantive community feedback and displeasure at what's being proposed at Fred Caterson Reserve. So I support this notice of motion. Obviously it takes into account the significant community feedback, and I think as a practical thing, so in terms of this motion getting up this evening and the support from this council, if they support it or not, I think that community engagement piece in terms of point 9, in terms of holding a public briefing, a forum of sorts, as opposed to going to a DA process and then having opportunities for public, communication during a DA process. So I think it would be a good resolve for this council, particularly 9, that we do have that public briefing to engage directly with concerned residents about the proposed master plan for Fred Caterson Reserve, because it is significant. I mean, at the time in late 2020, none of the residents were notified directly. They would have to go to a newspaper, as Councillor Kasby has mentioned, during COVID, go to a Have Your Say page or drop into the library and see things. And I think just the consultation of the initial architectural planner to just consult the people within the actual reserve itself, I think that was a bit of an oversight. We may have followed a process and followed the regulation, and we can say that we did the process, we did a community consultation, and that's that. But I think that we have significant community feedback and concern about this. The master plan is very important for Fred Caterson. It already presents a lot of sporting field activities, hobby, the embellishments of that, creating shade and other things. It's really important that we retain Fred Caterson Reserve. It's already servicing our community very well. And the question is, it's an established place at the moment, and the question is around this increase of sporting fields, whether it be the council delivering them or Eastwood District Rugby Union Football Club delivering them, for the community and residents that are involved directly with that site. And they've known that area as the pony club and casual recreational land. That should be considered in terms of the impact, traffic, etc., etc. So it's a very big site. Of course, we have for the residential, the recreational strategy, identify the population increase. We need the additional 9 playing fields for that area. It's easy to pick that site, I think, in terms of making a savings for council, in terms of not spending $100 million or $40 million or $60 million buying land in that vicinity. So it's easy for council to circle that and say that, and we do need to have that communication with the community that lives there. What would you, this is our strategy going forward. What would you prefer we spend our money on? And we need to have that rigorous process. I mean, a public briefing, people mentioned transparency on what is going on. People went to public forums, which I couldn't attend, and we all based our responses on, nothing to see here yet, I'm not quoting that. But let's wait for the ecological impact statement, or let's wait on the environmental reports. Now, I'm not saying council is being secretive, and we don't want that, but the perception is that it might be being secretive. The perception is that it is being secretive. So we do need to have an exhibition process, detail everything that everyone here hasn't read, the 600-page document about what the decisions we made when we made them and why, so understand what we're doing for community benefit, what are we spending money on, what aren't we, what casual space do they want, and how we do community engagement.
Do we have a call for an extension of time? So moved by Councillor Hodges, second by Councillor Kasby. Proceed for a minute, Councillor Tracy.
Yep. So I think that's immense, that a petition that we've received that's over 16,000, and that says a lot. I think council has to think long and hard about the steps forward, whether they're in support of Councillor Kasby's. But we know that the community sentiment's loud and clear about this. They deserve to have the opportunity to provide further feedback before we go down a DA approval process where people know they're not necessarily always going to be heard through that process. We want a good outcome for our community. We want to have sports fields, and we need to be open and honest and realise that we could have done things a little bit better. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any other speakers on the motion? Councillor Cox.
I've got a question for Councillor Tracy, if that's all right.
Yep.
You just talked about the secrecy, and in my experience serving on this council and another one, I've never known a council to try and deliberately hold secrets from the community to advance some sort of...
Councillor Cox will be heard in silence, please.
I'm sure they all know what I know better than me. Anyway, I've never seen the council deliberately try and hold something secret from the people. For some nefarious reason to get something through, and given Councillor Tracy served on this council for a long time and could have given the same assurances, he must know that there are other things that we've kept secret or something, and I'd like him to talk about that in his time.
Do you wish to respond? You don't have to.
Mayor, I just want to refer Councillor Cox the recording so we can have a listen to what I actually said, and he will, if he listened, he'll understand what I said.
You alluded to the community being concerned about secrecy. You could have said to them, I know of that never happening and you don't have to worry, but instead you brought it up.
Comments are to be directed through the chair.
Apologies, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair, Councillor Tracy, etc.
Are there any further questions, or did anyone wish to address council on this matter? Councillor Blue.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I agree that there is a degree of community concern around this.
Councillor Blue will be heard in silence.
I'm not going to continue if you're all going to keep making noises, right? Let me speak. As far as Councillor Kasby saying the multitudes and a significant number of people that have contacted me, I'm going to be honest, I've had four people contact me in regards to this. I was recently down, well not recently, earlier this year I was down at Knightsbridge Shops. I walked out and I was confronted with a sign saying stop the destruction of Fred Caterson Reserve and a picture of a dead bird. That's fear-mongering. That's scaring our residents. That's intimidating. Are we finished? That is intimidation. And that's what I'm feeling here tonight, and I'm not going to put up with it. This master plan and the this master plan and the Pony Club, in my opinion, are two different things. What we're looking at in front of us, and what I'm looking at in front of me, is the proposal for the Pony Club. That is the only thing that's currently designed. To a degree, it's not finished. It's the only thing that's had money collected for it, and it's the only thing that's in this year's budget. And we didn't, and it could be wrong, but I do not believe we had any submissions to this year's budget that said that the $4.5 million for Fred Caterson Reserve should not be approved. Didn't see it. I understand the community's concerns here. I'm hearing what you're saying, but it's a balancing act. We have to try and deliver something for everyone here. I take the points on notice that you're saying about the master plan and the other facilities, the tennis centre, the basketball centre, but I'm not looking at those at the moment. Nothing is proposed for that at this point in time, and when it does, it will go through the strict and stringent processes that we're going through now for the Pony Club site. We as councillors, as I think Councillor Cox has said, we as councillors have not seen an environmental impact statement yet. As the General Manager has stated, it's not finished. Council staff are still working through it. And if it doesn't stack up, it doesn't happen. We just thought I was clear. We just need to get this information together and have a look. But this proposal is not new. This proposal has been on the table for nearly 10 years. The money was started to be collected through the contributions plan CP19 for the Showground Precinct almost 10 years ago. The proposal was put to IPART. Well, IPART put it to council and said you need to provide facilities for playing fields and they have to be within this radius. Do we want to go down the path of acquiring people's homes? We do, Councillor Kasby. All right, well, we'll start with your house. This council looked at an option in 2018 for acquiring approximately 20 acres on Glenhaven Road. 1, couldn't afford it. 2, IPART wouldn't approve the amount that needed to be paid for it.
That's
and 3, someone was going to lose, or a number of people were going to lose their homes. I'm not saying that balances out to an environmental issue, and I'm not saying that takes over what has been said here tonight about the loss of vegetation. But I'm seeing through the number of plans that are coming through for the Pony Club site that there's changes happening. Things are getting better. We're not finished yet, so just let's just have a look at it and let's see what's in front of us. If it doesn't stack up, it doesn't stack up. But to going down the point, I'm really confused with this motion. Really, really confused. That's 4th time now. The master plan we're not putting into practice what is in that master plan in full. We're only looking at the Pony Club site.
Can I ask a question of the General Manager? Across Sydney, as the state government is lifting densities around stations, are councils all across Sydney grappling with where do we locate sports fields or schools or parks? Is it a challenge for all councils all across Sydney, particularly in terms of contribution plans and what IPART would allow in terms of funding?
Mr Mayor, in a very brief answer, of course it is. And in fact, if you look at the history of our own work in this space, you can see it's even a problem for us. So it wasn't that long ago that we had a shortage of fields to the point where we had people arguing over allocations, and we got very organised around delivering the fields that we were collecting money for, acquiring the land and developing them. You're starting to see them. The most recent fields open were Balmoral Road Reserve, followed by recently Samantha Riley's Drive Reserve and soon to be Stringer Road Reserve. So we're doing our bit to keep pace with the growing population. The reality is in 2015, following the corridor strategy of the New South Wales Government following the Metro, where they identified the growth that they expected, or that the capacity for growth in the precincts that the government expected along our stations was known. We created our own corridor strategy, but not only to accommodate and try and make sense of the numbers of the government strategy, but also how on earth we would service it with the basic infrastructure needs that a future population is going to require. The reality is when we did Showground, which incidentally was planned by the New South Wales Government and not the Council, the issue of playing fields was identified as a problem to solve. And it is for Castle, it is for Cherrybrook, and it is for the other precincts as well. Our new release areas, we've managed to solve it in part. We adopted a corridor strategy in around 2015 that identified this land as being suitable for active playing fields. And that was adopted by Council in that strategy. That soon followed the adoption by government of the New South Wales Precinct Plan for Showground Station. And in response to that, we started to develop a development control plan, but also a contributions plan to levy funds on future development to start to make provision for the infrastructure plans that we were going to be responsible for, that future population that hasn't arrived yet is going to need and demand when they do. We are collecting contributions for that facility. That was adopted in an exhibited contributions plan and is in force as of, I think, September 2018. We then followed the recreational strategy. So the rec strategy, we knew that the population that was coming, we were going to have real difficulties in serving the recreational needs and other needs in fairness. And in fact, we haven't solved some of those, particularly around culture. We knew we were going to have to work very hard to identify where this future population is going to enjoy the same levels of service that the community enjoys today. And that recreation strategy did a couple of things. It identified the thresholds. In fact, this precinct is going to be the lowest of our shire in terms of active recreation provision. And it is based on benchmarks. That's the benchmarks the government gives us to work it out on. That's the benchmarks that the government measures us around, are we collecting too much? So it is based on a government benchmark. So it is tough. So we did adopt those plans. The rec strategy also adopted the elite pathways. So we have elite pathways for almost all sports in this shire now. So not only can you view, but you can participate elite sport or at the highest level for nearly almost all major sports in our shire. That was a conscious decision of the council in the recreational strategy. It was adopted around about 2019. So it's been an evolution, and I hope that answers your question.
Did anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Hodges.
Yes, I have a question for the General Manager. During a discussion with Deputy Mayor Blue, Councillor Kasby made a suggestion that council, and it might have been a flippant one, but I'll ask the question anyway, that council buy land to place the sporting fields. Mr General Manager, have you made any inquiries of what it would cost to buy sufficient land to build 3 sporting fields so that our community know what it would cost our community if we had to buy land?
Mr Mayor, in answer to that question, and it's publicly available on our website, the contribution plan for the showground precinct canvassed the idea of buying land within the precinct for active playing fields, and it landed that it was just simply going to be unaffordable. The contribution rate would be so high that the future development of showground could not afford to provide it, and rightfully the council has a policy of not requiring the rest of the shire to fund it either. So it needs to the extent we can, effectively provide and pay for the facilities it needs. Now, if you have a look at the square metre rate, if you were to look at property in the showground precinct, it is in the order of, depending on where you're buying it, from $1,400 a square metre to $4,000 a square metre to buy the property. We need 5 hectares. So when you start to do the maths, depending on where you can buy the land and at what rate, it is somewhere between 70 and 150 million just for the land. For 10,000 households in the showground precinct, in amongst the other infrastructure it needs to provide, that's not affordable. It was not a sustainable model. We started talking to the Crown, who is the owner of this land, when it was leased to the Pony Club, and my understanding was it was leased exclusively. They knew in making us the Crown Land manager what the intention for this particular site was, and it was to fulfil active recreation needs for the showground precinct.
I have another question for the General Manager. Mr General Manager, you spoke about the contribution plan that was adopted, and you said it was in September 2018. That would have come, or in fact it did come to the council meeting on the 28th of August 2018, about a month prior. Is it the normal case that the council would place a contribution plan as such on public exhibition so that the community know what is proposed in a contribution plan and what would be built as a result of that contribution plan?
Mr Mayor, all the contribution plans are exhibited, and sometimes on multiple occasions, depending on if they need IPART certification. I can't recall whether this was a plan that did or didn't from memory, but certainly needs to be publicly exhibited as part of the process.
Well, perhaps I'll help you, Mr General Manager. The council minutes, or the council business papers of the 28th of August 2018 refers to the exhibition details, and I'll ask the General Manager a question shortly. It indicates the draft plans were exhibited from Tuesday the 9th of January 2018 to Friday the 9th of February 2018. It says further, notification letters were sent to 9 public authorities and to all landowners within the showground precinct, in brackets, 1,461 landowners. Would that sound right to you, Mr General Manager?
Mr Mayor, I'd have to take that on notice, and I believe Councillor Hodges has probably researched the minutes, and I'd defer to his recollection, but I'd have to take it on notice.
Mr General Manager, further, would it be normal within a contributions plan to indicate, for instance, that the contribution plan may be required for 3 active fields at Fred Caterson, if that was proposed?
Mr Mayor, I believe that's the substance of the contributions plan for the showground.
Perhaps I'll indicate the exhibited contribution plan indicates and this was sent out, I presume, to the 1,461 affected landowners in the area. Expansion of the Fred Caterson Reserve to provide 3 additional single playing fields, allowing for 1 cricket oval, associated parking, amenities, pathways and planting. So, if that's right, landowners were notified of a possible 3 additional playing fields back in 2018. Would that sound right to you, Mr. General Manager?
Yeah.
Mr Mayor, just to be clear, we would have exhibited the contribution plan to those residents.
Mr. General Manager, I have one more question.
Questions be addressed through the chair. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Through the chair to the General Manager.
Mr Mayor, through you to the General Manager, the substance of the notice of motion, which has been brought by Councillor Kasby, leaving aside all the notations and other things, but in paragraph 9, the substance of it seems to involve further community notification as to what is taking place, so that the community is aware of what's taking place. Is there a process by way of council giving further information when it becomes available, other than holding a public briefing, such as letters to groups of people?
Mr Mayor, through you, we've been routinely updating website on a variety of projects as they progress through the planning and delivery cycle. That's common.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I will speak on the motion.
Proceed.
Mr Mayor, this matter involving the Fred Caterson Reserve, as has been indicated, has been discussed going back to 2015. Our community, our parents who have children, perhaps many of the people here in the council chamber, have had children who've played sport. Children need active playing fields to play sport. We as a council have to make a responsible decision in relation to providing active playing fields for our children to play sports. And for instance, I look here back at the Hillshire Times back on the 13th of July 2015, and the headline reads, "Hills sporting clubs are bursting point, turning players away." That's back in 2015. Our community has grown substantially since that time, and we still have sporting clubs who are bursting at the seams. September 2015, Hills Football Club turns away children due to lack of sporting fields. That was in the Daily Telegraph.
Can you address me, Councillor Hodges?
In November 2015, there was the post-exhibition of the Castle Hill Precinct Plan, which referred also to the Hills corridor, which was then coming forward as a result of the metro precincts. The Hills corridor strategy required an additional 50,000 residents within the Castle Hill precinct. That got it up to 150,000, having regard to our existing requirements. So we had to find more open, active playing fields within the precinct. As I indicated, the council adopted the showground strategy on the 12th of December, and that showground strategy, which was adopted on the 12th of December 2017, referred to the expansion of Fred Caterson Reserve to provide 3 single playing fields and associated parking and amenities. So this was something which was actually put forward back in 2017 and has been available since that time. 28th of August 2018. Again, that was when it was adopted. Council, not unanimously, but Council did adopt the plan. CP19 commenced, as the General Manager indicated, on the 11th of September 2018. 7th of March 2019, the former Mayor of this Council, Mayor Byrne, indicated, "We understand there is a huge need for more sporting fields and facilities across the hills." Again, we were short of playing fields in 2019. 2020, the Fred Caterson Master Plan was before the Council. Item 4 placed the Fred Caterson Master Plan before the Council. One second. Perhaps prior to that, I should indicate that in August 2018, that was when the 1,461 letters went out to the community telling them that we were planning on putting 3 playing fields. I wasn't on council then. 2020, the Fred Caterson Master Plan was placed before the council. That Fred Caterson Master Plan was unanimously passed to go out on public exhibition by all councillors, including Councillor Kasby, the Labor Party.
Councillor Tracy.
Sorry, Councillor Tracy, I'm sorry. Councillor Tracy agreed with all the Liberal councillors that it go out on public exhibition. And there was considerable consultation. 24th of November 2020, the master plan was adopted by the council. Now, I hear you that you say, or members of the community, or certainly Councillor Kasby says, Councillor Kasby says that there was not enough consultation, but there was consultation in 2015, 2018 and 2020. 2023, I was present in this council in one of the rooms upstairs when a delegation from Save for Fred Caterson came into the council. They had a meeting with myself, with the now Deputy Mayor Blue, with the Mayor and with Councillor Brazier and with council staff. That delegation was provided with the information. One of the people who was the delegate, who was one of the spokesmen, and I won't mention his name unless I'm asked by Councillor Kasby, indicated that there was lack of consultation. You said he wasn't aware of it. However, having said,
moved by Councillor Massey.
Having said that, his wife had actually put a
Continue for a
submission in.
minute.
28th of February 2023, 19th of March 2023, there were public meetings. Those public meetings were actually meet the candidates when I was a candidate for State Parliament. Those meetings, one occurred at George Thornton and members of the Save the Fred Caterson were there. 19th of March was a meeting organised by Save the Fred Caterson. The Mayor was there, answered questions, answered all questions. We then went to election for State Parliament. The Labor candidate had on her call flute, Save Fred Caterson. The vote of the State Parliament, particularly at Samuel Gilbert, was quite high in favour of the Liberal Party. So one would expect in the event of this issue being such a large issue, particularly around the Save the Fred Caterson area, the vote would have been low. Arguably, one could say there's a mandate. However, having said that, I'm quite prepared to agree to the council continue to provide information on its website. I can't support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. Did anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes. I'm very concerned about this whole thing. I'm shocked that we're here because most of the concerns that, when I've encountered them in the few emails I've gotten about this, it's people saying whatever they're concerned about is based on fear about something that's not happening and not proposed. And it's similar to Councillor Boo's comments about the dead bird. There's a lot of fear-mongering that's been put around. I do have massive issues with accepting this petition. The petition was started with very different wording originally, and in a very transparent way, which I believe was called for by the Speaker and by Councillor Kasby as well. They've advised in the updates, which you don't see on the homepage, you have to actually click onto another part. After meeting with Council, we have modified some of the petition wording. Council has advised the master plan's only draft, blah, blah, blah. The point is that a more accurate way of putting it, I think, would be to say, we realised that most of the information we had, particularly the alarmist stuff at the start of this petition, which encouraged lots of people to sign, was inaccurate. It's significantly inaccurate. And it's probably led to this getting way out of hand, and we're going to start over. That would be the honest, transparent thing to do. Luckily, because they don't put it in there, what they actually changed, there is a thing called the Way Back machine, which lets you go back and see web pages if their snapshots were taken, and there wasn't one every day. But some people signed this petition when it said the Hills Council is planning to destroy 52 hectares of irreplaceable bushland. Now that is manifestly nothing to do with anything that's been discussed in the MOU or anything else. And people signed this petition, which Councillor Kasby has now tabled, when it said that, and their names are still on it, presumably, and they weren't advised that, well, actually, we don't rate it. And they didn't use the same unit of measurement, of course, because then the change would be obvious, and it changed to 52,821 metres squared, brackets 13 acres. So they used pretty much every unit of measurement they could, except the one they had originally, in some way to hide the change, I guess. I don't understand why you wouldn't stick with the same unit of measurement. I also note that at one point, the petition asked for people to include their postcode if they are from the Hills LGA. Again, if you're being transparent and honest, it would have been good to know how many did, but also just asking people to doesn't actually mean it's true. Looking at the petition also, I note at the start, when it first was launched and it first got snapshot before anyone had signed it, it said this petition is likely to be featured in recommendations if we get 100 signatures. And then as it progressed, Change.org, who need to encourage people to sign petitions so they can convince them to donate to keep their website going, say it gets to the point where they say this petition, if we clear 15,000, which you have, this petition becomes one of the top signed on Change.org, and presumably will be featured even higher on their page. So the likelihood that 16,000 Hills residents signed this, I think, is next to zero. The likelihood that it's half at 8,000, I think, also is next to zero. However,
Council Cox can speak in silence.
Not having had a chance to examine the petition or see it in any way, I can't speak to it. But I do have grave reservations because being around politics for a long time, it's amazing how Change.org petitions can get a burst of signatures really fast as if someone were just filling it in repeatedly with fake email addresses from a website or something like that. I think I did the calculations, and the 52 hectares, once you convert the units they use back, it turns into 5.26 hectares. So it's 10% of what was originally put on the petition that got so many people concerned. Within the petition, they talk about that the club may serve liquor, and that's a concern. And it's just all through this petition and the information people have been putting out, and even the comments on the motion by Councillor Kasby and Councillor Tracy, people have been choosing wording to inject fear and to take the worst possible outcome. And I see this endlessly. It used to happen a lot when I used to sit on a council when they assessed DAs. People always put the worst possible spin on the situation. It's going to be the worst thing ever, and it never ends up being anywhere near as bad as they say, and they say, I can't believe I was so concerned. And that is why I was particularly concerned that Councillor Tracy was alluding to the secrecy while not confirming whether or not he'd seen much of it himself. Councillor Kasby mentioned that the fields will be potentially used by the rugby clubs 24/7, the elite rugby clubs.
So moved by Councillor Massey, seconded by Councillor Ellis. Continue for a minute.
Thank you. But players for the club are predominantly locals of the Hill Shire and definitely within the Eastern District's catchment by definition. So even if they're elite players, they're still from here. And the juniors love to watch the elites play and dream of getting into the rep teams and all that. And the fields will be used by junior teams as well. That is the nature of these sorts of facilities. I'm also very concerned because the word reserve is used, and it's not a nature reserve. This is a reserve, and it's almost certainly the kind that is set aside for future fields and things. That's why it's already got a lot of sporting facilities on it. And if the people who were reserving it knew the level of environmental regulation we'd be subject to build these things, which again should give people comfort because it makes it so hard, they would probably have levelled the trees back then and got rid of it all. I'm glad they didn't. I'm glad the nature's there. But when people set this aside, it was to be used for these sorts of facilities. The fact that it's become environmentally significant is great, but that's not what it was originally intended for.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Did anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Jetty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, just before I go ahead, I would like to apologise to the audience because the manner my brought up is that when I speak, I should not have my back towards those who are involved in my discussion. So I really do apologize in advance, but as the setup may have it, I do not intend that. So I hope that is accepted in advance.
The Code of Meeting Practice also determines you speak through the chair as well.
Yes, so I have to face this way. But Mr. Mayor, today I actually want to have some thought process into this whole discussion. Firstly, I appreciate the audience because I would like to have this kind of audience in every council meeting. I would like to, I mean it, I would like to have the audience to sit through each item that we discuss and decide on. I would have liked to see this audience when we were struggling to make a decision to pay for the Waves swimming pool. I would have loved the feedback because as a professional high school teacher, we always practice that before we highlight one negative or one reprimand in a student, we had to highlight 5 the good things in that kid, so that the moral boost up is higher than when we are highlighting one thing that needs a bit of time, attention, and improvement. I would like that encouragement from my community because I'm sure we have done ample of enough things to be qualified for Fit for Future as a council. I suppose we have done heaps of good things to be declared as one of the most financially prudent and fiscally independent councils in New South Wales. I am sure that we have done many things which makes our residents proud and want to be our residents. And that's the ownership that counts over here today because they are so in love with us that they are here to reprimand us for something that they have been made to believe. I say this with true honesty because where are we saving trees? Where are we saving these trees? Also, I would like to say with due respect that when we have requested for everything to be saved and gone online, then we heard another story. We said, no, we have to look after our residents who are not able to have internet access, who are not tech savvy. Let's face it, the median age of our Hillshire population is between 35 to 38, which means, and I stand corrected over here, which means that is the most apt age for the families, young families with young kids. Let's face it, they will need schools, they will need these 21 fields. We have been struggling. This is my second term only, and I actually tread very carefully when I make a decision because I'm so worried about if the decision will be absolutely, pub tested and pub warranted and regarded for next 20 years. Why? Because these 21 fields would not come from anywhere. It is easy said than done to say, oh yes, the council should spend $140 or $60 million to acquire land. Where will that money come from? Let me assure you, it will come from our residents' pockets. Don't get me wrong. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It will come from your pocket, my pocket, everyone who lives in the Hillshire's resident. It will not come from anywhere else. When we paid for Waves swimming pool, it did not come out of the pocket because the council decisions had been absolutely rock solid financially in last 20 years. That's where we got that money from. How can you just believe in things being told to you when you're already doing hard? I am doing hard at the moment with the increased interest rates. I cannot afford to get my son to another sport activity because I have to do my numbers before making that commitment. One lesson that he misses of swimming, I feel, because that $38 is a lot in my pocket. And also...
Moved, Councillor Massey, second. Councillor Hodges, all in favour. Continue for a minute.
Also, there are days when we sit here and the council meetings do go past 10 p.m. I have stayed here maximum till 1:45. And I don't regret that because I feel it is an honor. But I would really appreciate if you would actually hold us more accountable, but at the same time appreciate us by listening to the recordings for every council meeting. And please, hand on your heart, tell me, did you know that they are available the following week on Wednesday? You should listen to our recordings because that will actually tell you exactly what we are doing. That will actually give you more power to say, hey, Councillor JT, your decision on that item was not correct. You will know if other councillors made what decision, but then you will have a comparison. I'm not saying that you are ignorant at all because I would dare not, otherwise you would not have made the correct choice by picking the residents' representatives. But I will rest my case and I really appreciate and thank you for your attendance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jetty. Did anyone else wish to... a question?
Yes, a question, if that's okay, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of things just cropped up that I'd like to ask through you, Mr Mayor, to the General Manager. One was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't think that IPART approved CP19 because the cap was reduced under the 20,000 limit, so it was just self-approved. Is this correct?
Take that on notice. It may or may not have been. I don't recall. It
Okay.
depends on the threshold.
Okay.
And it's certainly adopted by council.
Okay. I did call IPART and they didn't have any, any knowledge of that. So I think the contributions were scaled down to 19,974. So they came under that 20,000 cap. So it didn't have to go to IPART. And then another one. Just relating to the buying up of houses, and look, the people that I spoke to were moving out anyway, so maybe we could buy those houses up. So through you, Mr.
Councillor
Mayor.
Kasby, you do have a right of reply. So
Yeah,
if there's questions to the General Manager, we can proceed with that.
General
Otherwise,
Manager.
you do have a right of reply very soon. You can debate there.
How much would it cost, Mr. General Manager, to recreate unique natural open space, rich in biodiversity, home to many native birds, animals, some threatened, including a home for our beloved platypus in the Hillshire, such as we have now in Fred Caterson Reserve? Can you put a price on that for me?
I don't have any valuation information about that, Mr Mayor.
Are there any other councillors that wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Kasby, your right of reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Oh, look, I knew councillors would try to pull the petition apart and discredit it. Yes, not all the signatures are local, but a great many are, and if you took the time to read the comments, they demonstrate detailed local knowledge. If the council wants to insult people and not accept the petition, that's up to them. I guess that most seated behind me have signed it. Are we going to ignore all of them too? The petition was started based on information on Council's own original draft master plan. They are not deliberately trying to deceive you. It is not reasonable to ask them to start a new petition every time Council adjusts the plan. And the fact that there are minor changes now to the former Pony Club site doesn't invalidate the petition. The master plan itself wasn't put forward, supported by any ecological studies, to even say that it was feasible. There is no final concept plan, and a DA is yet to be submitted. So while the petition may now include numbers that are not strictly accurate, we don't even know what is proposed now will reflect the final outcome. Actually, nothing is certain. I congratulate Council on changes to the latest concept plan, which reduces the vegetation loss. But we have not gone far enough. It is not just about the number of trees. The real ask of this petition is the line that reads that Council carefully consider the clearing of any bushland in Fred Caterson Reserve and only add infrastructure in harmony with the environment. The debate here today points out two things very, very clearly to me. One, that natural open green space is not valued as highly as active playing sports fields. And two, that you keep missing the point, labouring away about fields when we're not talking about community fields. We're talking about a private land grab for an elite rugby club. The master plan tries to reassure that a balance will be achieved, but I question how the community is to trust us to get this balance right if the extent of the additional elite facilities above that of community level sport clearly show an unsympathetic disregard for the unique area that it sits in. Residents are not against the master plan as a whole. Everyone realises the facilities and other fields at Fred Caterson do need an upgrade, but they say what is planned for the former Pony Club site is completely over the top. We're not talking about community playing fields. The development threatens the very character of the reserve forever and locks away public green space which belongs to the people of the Hills Shire. There will be noise and crowds and bright lights and unbearable traffic, and the surrounding streets will be congested with parked cars. The plan puts one elite sport over the needs of the rest of the community and the environment. Residents don't feel we're being honest with them. They're repeatedly told that council is only responsible for community level playing fields with natural turf and regular lighting, something most of the community would accept. But by entering an MOU, holding planning discussions with Eastwood, council is instrumental in laying the foundations for a successful DA process and is enabling the development of this elite facility. We can't keep distancing ourselves and claiming that council only has plans to develop community playing fields, knowing full well what the end goal is. Once those community fields are laid, it's all but a done deal for this elite facility. The recreation strategy, as keeps being referred to, did not name Fred Caterson Reserve as the venue for an elite rugby union facility, which eliminated yet another opportunity for the public to have their say. Who said we needed elite sport in every code? What is this thirst to provide for elites over the common good of many? There is no evidence that we need it. There is evidence to say it's going to be environmentally damaging and exclusionary. Yes, I acknowledge we have a shortfall, but should playing fields, especially elite level ones, catering to the very few, always take preference over valuable public green space? It's the same old story. Organised, powerful groups get what they want to the detriment of the community as a whole. We can do better. This doesn't have to be our legacy. It was adopted during COVID. We didn't consult well enough. There is clearly big public concern. We need to reconsider this, and the first step would be to improve engagement and hold an open and transparent public hearing.
We have a motion moved by Councillor Kasby, seconded by Councillor Tracy. All those in favour of the motion say aye. Aye. Those against, the motion's lost. We have... Okay, you can sit down. We have a division. We don't need to stand.
Mr. Mayor, could we bring the chamber to order?
Yeah.
Could councillors refrain from clapping for disorder?
Councillors, can you vote on your keypads? Can we have that vote again? Councillor Tracy voted incorrectly. We'll just do that vote again. Who are we waiting on?
Could I just ask another question through you, Mr. Mayor?
No, we're voting right now.
Oh, it's not regarding...
No.
That?
We're voting right now. We'll do this process.
Councillor Kasby hasn't voted.
Oh, I voted already.
Yeah, we had to vote again. Okay. So voting for the motion is Councillor Tracy, Councillor Kasby, Voting against the motion is Councillor Jetty, Councillor Cox, Councillor Hodges, Councillor Blue, Councillor Ellis, Councillor Massey, myself, Mayor Gangemi, and meeting absent is Councillor Hay, Councillor Burton, Councillor Bonham, and Councillor Brazier.
Could I just
Is
ask
there
a
a-
procedural question?
Is there any... Sorry.
Just,
You may ask.
I just wondered, for future reference, how many people are allowed in the foyer? Because there was a lot of people waiting outside in the foyer. How many people can come into the chambers, and is there a provision to open the walls or that type of thing?
Take it on
later?
notice and discuss
Okay.
outside the
Yep.
meeting.